the continuation of the Legends of the New Haven County Bar Association. It's my pleasure to speak to some greats from our bar association, and our interview today is with John Kennedy, who practices in New Haven with the firm Kennedy, Johnson, Schwab, and Roberge. I've known John for many years, so this will be a fun interview. John is a terrific guy, terrific lawyer. He went to Yale undergrad, went to UConn Law School, graduate with honors, worked with another legend, the late Don Walsh, many, many years ago, which maybe he'll chat about for a while. He's won just about every kind of award, from being in the Connecticut Trial Lawyers Top 10 for the last few years. He's won the Connecticut Trial Lawyers Association Lifetime Achievement Award. He's been president of this organization, and I can't believe it's been 30 years, John. Honestly, that's shocking to me.
Amazing.
I mean, I think it was 10 years for me, which is shocking, but 30 for you is crazy. Past president of the Connecticut Trial Lawyers Association and Super Lawyers, wins the New Haven Malpractice or Personal Injury Lawyer of the Year. I don't know, it seems like they alternate the last 6-7 years. So with that, John, welcome and thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. It's hard to believe anybody would call me a legend.
Well, I'm calling you a legend, and therefore that's good enough for you, I'm sure. But I just want to start by tell me a little bit about what even attracted you to the law. How did you end up going to law school? And we'll go from there.
Well, if I'm totally honest, when I got out of college in 1975 was a very difficult time economically in this country. And I was looking at going to New York and trying my hand at banking, but really wasn't attracted to that at all. So I couldn't make a decision about what to do. So I deferred my decision by going to 3 more years of school, ended up at UConn Law School. And the rest, as they say, is history. How I got to what I do now, you may not know this, but I started out at a general practice, mostly commercial type firm. Sessa, Hogan and Schur. Vicky DeSessa, another president of the organization's father, was the head of that firm. And I was there for a couple of years and realized that I was better suited to be in court and doing litigation than I was doing commercial closings. And I knew Don Walsh from growing up, and he asked me whether I'd be willing to come work with him. And that's kind of where it all started.
So a lot of our younger viewers probably don't remember Don Walsh, but he was, I mean, as I always understood, was sort of like the trial guy in New Haven, or for the whole county, pretty much.
He was larger. He was a larger than life kind of trial lawyer. He was a person who tried many, many, many cases. He was only comfortable, it seemed, when he was in the courtroom. He was not comfortable doing office work at all. And he tried any kind of case that he could get his hands on. Some of them were difficult cases that he would prevail routinely on. And he was just a terrific trial lawyer, extraordinarily gifted on his feet more than anything else.
Sure. And how long did you work with him?
I worked with Don, I'm trying to remember now, I think a little more than 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And David Johnson and I left there to form our own firm in 1988.
That must have been tough when, it's almost like you have a older brother, a father figure. I know I've never had to break off from my older brother figure, Tony Nuzzo, because we've been together for over 30 years, and he actually is now retired. But imagine how hard that must be to make that decision and move on. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was difficult. There was no animosity. One of the great things about Don was that when he was such a gentleman, when we decided to leave, I think he realized that we had an opportunity that we could develop on our own. And he was very easy to get along with. We made an agreement, a handshake, on what files were going with us and what files were staying, and what the paybacks would be and how we would divide the fees. And there was not a moment, either one of us hired a lawyer, and we worked it all out literally in probably an hour at his desk. And so, afterwards, there's a little tension for a couple of years, but then everything got back to the way it always was. And I served as his arbitrator on cases and vice versa after that. And he even referred me a case or two later. So we
That's
turned
great.
out to work out very well.
You don't hear that quite as often these days, but that's certainly old school. I mean, we've all, witnessed even, family breakups, and sometimes it's even harder when it's family involved. But so, well, good for you. Um, so I understand now that that Michael works with you, your son, and your daughter used to work with you, right?
Right.
Speaking of family,
Michael started working with us a couple of years ago, a couple of months, excuse me, a few months ago, I should say, in February. My daughter worked with me for about 5 years, right when she got out of law school, and then had three small children and hasn't been back since. So I'm not sure, whether she's coming back, but it's been great. Michael's obviously worked in other firms. He worked at Riscassi for a while, and he worked at Silver Golub. And so he comes here with a different outlook than we have in some ways because he's done things a little differently. But it's been great. It's rewarding at the same time. Anybody who's ever coached their kid or had a kid that they worked with in another capacity knows how hard you can be on your own children. So I try to avoid being that way. But it's been great. He's been a real
do you
asset to me. And
do you work directly with him, or do you try to let other people kind of interact with him more than you?
we do both. Right now, he's working with me on a lot of larger files, and so that's been really helpful. But other people work with him as well. We've got a little combination.
Well, I know, having had a pretty involved case with him in his previous firm, that he's a great lawyer and a gentleman like his father. But it's funny. I haven't had the a pleasure or displeasure, as you might look at it, of having my kids ever come back to live with me. But I know a lot of people did during the pandemic. But you kind of live with someone more in the office than you do at home. So I wonder if sometimes you go back to that parent-child dynamic. Does that ever happen with you guys?
Not really. He's not having any of that. That's for sure. He's his own man, and one of the great things I think for him was that he did work elsewhere. He developed his own kind of personality, his own way of doing things without me looking over his shoulder because he didn't work here for 10, 8, 10 years or whatever it was before he got here. So that's worked out well. I'm
That's
learning
great.
from him in some respects too.
Well, he's worked for two other firms that are much better than your firm, so I would hope so. Now, he's worked for three great firms, let's face it, including yours. But so you've really, you strike me as someone who, at a stage in your career, some people might be, slowing down, or maybe even planning a retirement. You seem to, at least by my last interactions with you, going strong. I mean, is it because you love it? Um, or I mean, why you're still trying cases, for example? So
I still really like it. There are days I have to say I wouldn't use the word love because this is a difficult business, the law business in general, but litigation is, it's an adversarial business. So not every day is perfect, but I
mhm,
still do enjoy on the whole what I do. I like, as you said, I like trying cases. I like developing cases. I like the intellectual challenge of particularly the medical cases. And so I'm going to do it as long as I can. Over the past few years, I've started to get involved a little more as a mediator too, which I don't know, it's made me busier rather than less busy because now I have less time to work on my own files. Um, but I still enjoy all of it pretty much.
so tell me what you find to be the most joyful aspects of trying cases, and be completely truthful.
Well, I think the most difficult part of trying cases for me is orchestrating all of the evidence and all of the witnesses. And a lot of the cases I try, we have witnesses who are coming from out of state or who are professional medical people who would have difficulty lining them up or getting the time straightened out. Once you have that all done, though, and you have the case ready to go, what I like about trying cases is that it's one witness at a time, one issue at a time, and that's really a luxury when you're sitting in the office. And I know you work from home, you're working from home today, when you're not in the office, it's a lot easier to concentrate on one task at a time and be focused and about what you're doing. And I really enjoy being in court where nobody can bother me and I can just focus on the witness and what the evidence is and what the cross-examination or examination of the witness is. And that's the fun part. And of course, making a closing argument is the most fun of all, because then you can kind of say what you need to say about your case.
You know, some people think that the great trial lawyers are good actors or flamboyant, and you seem to be very low key, nice guy, kind of grounded. You don't seem like you're any of those, grandiose type things. How does that sort of, low key personality, for lack of a better way of putting it, work for you in trials?
I think my wife would not think of me as low key, but I do get emotional about cases and I do get emotional in the courtroom, but not probably only in selected doses, I would say. Um, one thing I would say about all lawyers, who are, especially lawyers who are going to be trial lawyers, you have to be yourself. If you're trying to, I used to watch Don Walsh try cases and I used to say, boy, he was somebody who was, as I said, extremely good on his feet, and he was great at trying to
Emote.
emote. And I learned pretty early that you can't fake that. You either have it or you don't have it. And I emote, but when I do it, it's going to be from the heart, and it's going to be about something that I'm really either upset about or something that I think is really important. And so I think, everybody has to use their own personality. I think, Michael Koskoff, who's another, I would say, mentor of mine, he was an actor, as we all know. He was an actor first and a trial lawyer later. But everybody
And a screenplay writer.
writer, but people have different styles, and I think there's lots of styles that can be effective.
Sure. Any other thoughts? Be yourself is a great tip, but any other thoughts for aspiring trial lawyers?
Well, the obvious one, is to be prepared. I mean, I think if you know your file inside and out before you step into the courtroom, that's the most important thing you need to have. And then, preparation is 90% of the job, and the other 10% is maybe emotion, maybe strategy, maybe instinct, but preparation is the biggest part of the job. And so, Don Walsh, we keep talking about Don Walsh. He was able to pick up a file and walk over to the courthouse, not having looked at it for forever, or at least a long time, and still be able to function. That's not my style. If I'm going to go in there, I want to make sure I know everything about it. And I think I frankly think that's the better way. I'm not saying that it's necessarily the right way, but that's the better way.
Sure. Yeah, there was certainly an old school. I mean, I think when maybe there were more trials, we had that other, I forgot the name of the court, the circuit court or something, where there was
They were on trial every 10 minutes in those courts.
Right. And that's the way, I mean, Tony Nuzzo kind of grew up with, at Rainier Taylor, and, the likes of Bill Moeller would, have just literally three trials a week. And, I think that you can't prepare the way, you and I would like to back then. But now, so you've said you've transitioned to mediations, and, I will say, I'll give you a little, plug that I've used you and you are very effective. And I think that my firm does more defense work, although I do both plaintiffs and defense, as you know. And sometimes there's a reluctance, I think, of certain lawyers to say, I'm not going to use a plaintiff's lawyer. But I think, frankly, I've often thrown your name out because I feel like if it's a difficult plaintiff, you'll have more cachet with the plaintiff's lawyer and perhaps the plaintiff. Has that been working for you?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I never really sought out the mediations. They just kind of happened on their own, and I don't even really market for it. And I probably do, one or two a week now. I think that some people may use me for that purpose. They think that because I'm a plaintiff's lawyer, that maybe I'll have more sway with the plaintiff's bar or the plaintiff, him or herself. But I never really ask how they got to me or why. I just kind of do it. For some reason, for example, I started doing mediations of sex abuse cases, and I've done a few of those in my career, but not a lot. But I
Mhm.
did a few of them, and now I get a lot of those cases. And I do a lot of mediations on medical malpractice cases and
Sure.
other. But yeah,
So, having been in that mix for a while, John, can you give some advice to younger lawyers about handling mediations? What works, what doesn't work?
well, what works, and I hesitate to these old saws about knowing your file and being prepared. Obviously, that's critical. I think you have to have an idea when you come into mediation as to what is your target and how do you think you're going to get there. Um, there's been a lot of written and spoken and taught about mediations, and and I don't think any of that really works other than trying to listen. I mean, you need to listen to what the other side is saying as much as talk about what your position is. It's not a one-way street. Sometimes the plaintiff is the most important person in the case. Sometimes the plaintiff is the least important person in the case because there's a liability issue, or the defendant it is a bad witness or a good witness. I think you need to know your case, know the personalities, and know what you're trying to achieve and where you're trying to get to. And realize that it doesn't always have to settle that first day at mediation. Sometimes it takes more time than just the one day.
Do you find that you spend a lot of time with the plaintiff?
It depends. I try to do what the lawyers need me to do. For example, I don't always have a joint meeting. If somebody tells me that a joint meeting somebody's gonna say something that's gonna blow up the mediation, I won't do that. If
Mhm.
somebody thinks that I need to hear from both lawyers or the plaintiff so that the plaintiff can air what they feel they need to air so that they can feel comfortable that they've had a process, I'll do that. I don't have any set formula. I know that some mediators do, where they get everybody in the room and everybody talks. I kind of usually ask the lawyers what they think is the best process, and use that as a guide to try to get to the end.
It is amazing how different everyone's style is in these. There's a lot of retired judges now that are very different from each other. And but I agree with you. I think it makes sense to at least feel everyone out as to whether those preliminary sessions work, because I've seen them alienate people. But sometimes, I mean, the plaintiff um, needs to be
Absolutely.
heard. I had just a quick diversion. One of the most interesting mediations I had a long time ago. I represented, I think it was John Deere, and they had someone who pretty much was a full time, mediation attender, and he looked at this plaintiff in the eye and he said, "Ma'am, I want you to know how bad the folks at John Deere feel that you've gone through this tough time and how hurt you are, and we feel real terrible that you were injured using one of our products. But having said that, hope you have to understand that nothing we say today is going to take away from that we really do care. But I just have to say that we have no liability and we don't believe most of your damages." So, but he had a way of like pulling that off, because he first just said, "Look, we hear you." And it was beautiful. It was actually kind of beautiful.
There's all different styles. I don't think I have any one style. I always try to give the plaintiff a forum to talk, especially if the plaintiff's lawyer wants to have that, whether it's with everyone else or just with me. I think that's really important, and because I think people, one of the things didn't talk about is there are just less trials. One reason was the pandemic, but there were less trials even before the pandemic, and it's kind of interesting. Mediations have become, in some ways, kind of the dispute resolution process of choice. So you want to give everybody a chance to be heard and do their thing.
I've seen I don't mediate as often as you do. I do a couple a month, but I've seen such a disparity in position papers. Tell me a little bit about that. I think that's important to
Yeah.
clarify.
Well, I think, yeah. Sometimes I'll get a position paper from somebody who I can tell who spent 10 minutes on it, and gives me essentially a copy of the complaint and all of the medical reports and every document, which is a little bit aggravating because it doesn't tell me what I need to know. I like the mediation papers that focus on what are the actual issues and focus on the most important parts of the case, including the medical parts of the case. Um, because I think the shotgun approach, which is I think a little bit lazy, the lazy approach, doesn't help. And yeah, so I think longer is not necessarily better. Shorter is probably better. Not too short so that we don't have enough information, but shorter is better. And you have to know the other things about your case too, like are there liens that need to be satisfied? Are there litigation loans, for example? All kinds of things that the lawyer needs to have prepared and may help the mediator get to the right number.
Sure, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, you're right. Sometimes I've seen these treatises, and it's usually that's the mistake on the defense side is to just give you it's like these, appellate briefs basically, and it gets, the issues get lost in the shuffle. Like you said, you just want to, focus on the key issues. But it's
A
an
lot of,
interesting process.
a lot of people are using settlement videos now. I see a lot more of those in some of the bigger cases, and I think those can be really helpful to the mediator. They're obviously one-sided because they're made typically by the plaintiff's side, but they are helpful because they kind of demonstrate the damages. And the best thing about those things is to send those not just to the mediator, but send those to the other side so that they get in front of the adjuster or the person with the decision-making process with enough time so that they can react to it. You don't give it to them the night before. Get that done a few weeks ahead, a month ahead if you could do it, and get it to the defense lawyer so he can give it to the person who's going to make the decisions about money.
Well, you just touched on something that I think very few plaintiffs lawyers appreciate, which is understanding the decision-making process on the defense side, on the insurance side. There's committees, there's levels of authority, there's reserves that may have to be changed, and that onto itself. I never understood early on in a case when I call a plaintiff's lawyer and I say, can you just send me all the medicals? Just give me what you got. And they resist. And I said, you understand that my client is trying to set a reserve. So
Right.
you can help me do that if you give me everything.
Yeah, exactly. At mediation, you want to know that the person who's making the decision on the defense side has everything in front of them so that they can evaluate the case. I mean, I was at a mediation, I'm not going to say yesterday, but it was a couple days ago, where exactly that situation where the reserve clearly wasn't high enough and they didn't have all the information. So now we're going to have to go back and start over again. And that person has to go to their superior to try to get more money. And it's a much harder process once they've looked at it once, as you know, because you defend the cases.
Sure, sure. So since this is obviously sponsored by the New Haven County Bar Association, and my interviewee is a past president and I am a past president, we wouldn't be doing a service to not discuss what role it's played in your career and in your development, not only for business but just for your professionalism. So tell me a little bit about your involvement in the bar and what you think you've gained from your involvement.
Well, the way it started for me was, again, I go back to Don Walsh. He was a past president. And so when I went to work for him, he was very much an advocate for getting involved in the bar association. And so that's what I did. And once you get on that chain of officers, you can't get off. But, the bar was a great resource for me. And as you said, a great resource for development of business. It seemed like there was always a bar event when I was a young lawyer. There was always a Christmas party or a annual picnic or summer event. And, there were things in between. And, there was a real camaraderie. There was a real community. We'd see the people you'd meet at the bar association events. We'd go over to the short calendar where there was a cattle call, or you'd go over in the hallway on the fourth floor and you'd see people that you'd met. And it was, they knew what you did and you knew what they did. And there's a referral back and forth. But to my way of thinking, the New Haven bar is the best bar there is in terms of the local bar associations. I don't want to cast aspersions on any of the others, but it always seemed to me that the New Haven bar was closer and there was much more of a community than there was in the other bar associations. And it's funny, and I think that the lawyering in the New Haven County Bar has always been good. I know Judge Young, who's been presiding here in New Haven until recently. Now Judge Camp's taken over. And he's talked to me multiple times about the fact that he thinks that New Haven lawyers are the most prepared lawyers of any of the places he's sat in the state, and he's sat in a number of the judicial districts. And I think that comes from the type of community that we have, and the interactions that we have. I think the one thing we've lost in the pandemic is that you're not seeing anybody anymore. You don't go over to the fourth floor, and I don't run into Rick Roberts or somebody else who I haven't seen in a while to talk about things and talk about cases. And I think I'm hopeful we get back to that soon.
Sure. And even all good points. Even before the pandemic, John, I think you're alluded to this, but there's fewer trials. There's
Right,
not short calendar. There's not the cattle call.
right.
So, and the notion of knowing your adversaries, your colleagues is just so critical that I think now calls out for more involvement in the bar than it ever did.
I would agree with that. I think that the bar associations may have to be a substitute for what we used to do, which is we get together in the courthouse. We're not doing that anymore. Or
Right.
even depositions, we're doing a lot of them remotely, and pre-trials are all remote, so you don't really get to shake somebody's hand or talk to them in the hallway before or after the event. It's all within that short window that you're on screen.
I have to admit that I would never have thought years ago that I would consider a lot of my good friends to be lawyers, or that I would end out there. But that is the case with me. I mean, I really like, and it's really mostly through the bar. I mean, my drinking buddies, a lot of them are lawyers, and it's not honestly, it's not just about business development. I do get referrals, and I do know who to refer cases to, including you. But I also feel that having a friendship just makes it a more pleasant process. I started working in New York for a year, it was very different there. But also just knowing that you can talk honestly. If I call you up and I say, look, I only have this much money, you're gonna believe me because I mean, I'll probably still be lying to you, but at least I'll be close to that much money. So
But yeah, right. You have a basis in the relationship for making decisions, and it really makes a difference. I mean, I even we're talking about my son Michael. He's been a lawyer, I think, 8 or 9 years. I don't know, 10 years, but the last 2 years, he hasn't seen a soul. That's hard. We have a new associate we hired in the fall of 19, hasn't really been over to court and hasn't really met anybody. It's other than on screen. That's not good, I don't think. I
so
think the
now
patients have.
speaking of sorry, John, speaking of Michael, so are you have three children? Are they all lawyers?
Yes, Patrick is at Riscasi's office, and Michael is here, and my daughter Christine is semi-retired, I guess is the way I.
So would you say that you encourage, discourage, or were neutral about them going to school, law school?
I would say that I was 100% neutral. I didn't push them to be lawyers, and I didn't push them not to be lawyers. And I know that there are lawyers, lawyer parents who do both of those things. I was pretty much completely neutral. I didn't say a lot about how difficult or how easy or how much I liked or didn't like it. I think that they just watched and decided to become lawyers. My wife says I should have said more. Uh, but yeah, I was kind of I was very neutral about it, I would say.
Well,
I,
I'm
I
sure you.
My daughter wanted to be a lawyer because she was an artist her whole growing up, and then decided to go to law school. It's kind of interesting.
Well, I'm sure that you led by example and had a lot more influence than you, or at least are admitting to. But I think I respect that you didn't, push them or discourage them, because I think that that's just if you want your kid to do something, tell them not to do it. So uh,
Right. Exactly. Exactly true.
I was the same way with, well, my daughter had no interest, but my son did work as a paralegal, and he realized from working there that that's not for him. So he
Right.
went into the music industry, and he's real happy. So,
There you
uh,
go.
but any thoughts? Speaking of young lawyers, any thoughts about I don't know how you feel the practice of law has changed? Number one, number two, any tips for success that you've obviously found in your career? And I know those are big questions, but
Well, I would say, where is it going? And where does it come from? I do worry about it being less personal than it was in the past. I think that the personal relationships we talked about a few minutes ago really make a difference. And you know, as you said, just going to work and working on files and making it adversarial all the time, it's not that rewarding. You know, if you can have a relationship with your opponent and you know, like you and I have had many cases against each other over the years, and we still consider each other friends. And you know, and that's the way it should be. It's not, it's a business. It's not personal. And I think that's a little bit been lost. In terms of how to make your way, I don't really know, other than show up and 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 do what you have to do and do your job. You know, one of the things on our side of the fence is there's a lot of client contact. So, you know, I learned a long time ago that the most important thing that people want is a return phone call. Now it's probably a return email or a return text too. And people respect that you get back to them, whether you get back to them with bad news or good news. They just want to hear back from you. And you know, the lawyers, well, in my mind, who get themselves into trouble in our business are the lawyers who just don't return people's inquiries, you know, because people get upset and angry. And so I guess, you know, trying again to be responsive to your clients, good or bad, I think is really an important thing.
I couldn't agree more. It sounds like basically the speech I got from Tony, 35 years ago. And, actually that he always said, you know, tell the client about bad news even faster than good news. But that's great advice. Well, John, this has been great, as I expected it would be, and we appreciate your time. And I'm sure we'll talk soon. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you, Rick. Good to see you.